If you've ever been betrayed after years of loyalty, this story is for you. And if not, you'll still walk away with something most people learn too late. Stay until the end. 17 years of loyalty, erased in a single morning. Boss fired me without warning. But what they didn't know was, I held the keys to everything they had ever built. Reed, after 17 years, we're eliminating your position, Simon Hale said flatly, barely lifting his eyes from the paperwork in front of him. Clean out your desk by the end of the day. I stood there for a second, letting the words settle. Like dust over a grave, my name's Reed Callahan, 52 years old. Until that Tuesday morning, I was the senior systems analyst at Blackwell Technologies, a rising logistics tech firm based in Ashridge, Indiana. I didn't argue, didn't ask why, didn't offer some desperate last defense. I just nodded once and walked out of Simon's office with nothing but my dignity intact. No anger, no outbursts, only the slow burning sting of a man who had given everything and was tossed aside like outdated hardware. Back at my desk, the younger employees, kids I'd mentored, trained, stayed late to help, stole nervous glances as I quietly packed my things, a family photo, a chipped coffee mug my son made in 9th grade, and the stubborn little cactus that had somehow survived 17 years of fluorescent lighting and budget cuts. Emily from marketing, face pale, hurried over. Reed, I just heard. This is insane. You practically built this place. I gave her a tired half smile. Companies change direction, I said evenly. But after everything you've done, she began, voice rising, attracting attention. It's fine, I said, shutting the box with a soft thud. It wasn't fine, but a man doesn't tear down his own legacy on the way out the door. As I left, I caught Simon standing at his office door, arms folded, watching me like a guard seeing a prisoner off. No handshake. No gratitude, just cold managerial efficiency. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't just another name on a termination list. I was the architect of their foundation, the one who had designed the systems, buried the safeguards, and crafted the digital skeletons no consultant could ever map without my blueprint. They thought they were eliminating a liability. They had just set a match to the powder keg they didn't even know existed. At the front desk, I handed over my security badge, renewed faithfully 17 times, and stepped into the Indiana afternoon. For a long moment, I just sat in my truck, staring back at the gleaming glass tower of Blackwell Technologies. No rage, no regret, just a slow, dangerous clarity setting in. I left without a fight. But deep down, I knew the real battle hadn't even begun yet. You can fire a man in a day, but you can't erase the instincts he built over a lifetime. The security badge I'd just surrendered, renewed 17 times without fail, still felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket as I drove home through the quiet streets of Ashridge, Indiana. The same streets I'd driven for almost 2 decades. The same neighborhood where I'd built a family, raised 2 kids, and believed in something like loyalty. They thought they'd seen the last of me. They had no idea that Wednesday would be educational. When I joined Blackwell Technologies, it was 2 rooms above a discount pharmacy. Now it had its own 6-story HQ, a patent portfolio, and global partnerships I'd personally helped secure. I'd turned down better offers. Watched smaller companies crash and burn. I stayed because I believed in building something. My wife, Julia, used to joke that the company servers were my second home. She wasn't wrong. I knew every firewall, every line of back-end code, every redundant loop I'd buried in case someone ever tried something stupid. And then, Simon Hale showed up, MBA from Chicago, a turnaround specialist. The kind of guy who used terms like agile synergy and organizational velocity while sipping $18 green smoothies during layoffs. 6 months ago, Simon brought in Damian Wolf, high-dollar consultant, suit too sharp, smile too practiced. He had a LinkedIn page that read like a startup pitch deck. Whenever I walked past their meetings, the air changed. Hushed voices, sideways glances, doors that used to stay open now clicked shut behind them. 3 months ago, I noticed the first shift. My admin access, untouched for years, suddenly had restrictions. Just one permission removed here, one access point revoked there, nothing obvious, nothing loud, just surgical subtractions. Slow, precise. I didn't sound the alarm, didn't raise a hand in panic. I did what I'd always done best. I watched. And I documented. "You've been quiet lately," Julia said one evening as we sat on the porch, watching a thunderstorm roll across the horizon. "Just some changes," I replied, taking a sip of bourbon. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just restructuring. It was a clean-out, and I was being swept away. Meetings I used to lead, now held without me. Projects I architected, handed to kids who still asked what root access meant. Then came the final clue. 2 weeks before they fired me, I was running a routine integrity scan across archived data clusters, something most people skipped. But I never skipped the small stuff. That's when I found it. A new vendor pipeline had been embedded in the financial backend. Vendor: Northbridge Consulting. Group: name didn't ring a bell. Quick lookup: business registered just 14 months ago. Listed address: a mailbox inside a strip mall UPS store. No website, no staff. Payment started small, then grew like clockwork. Thousands, then tens of thousands. Each transaction cleverly timed to coincide with legitimate system upgrades, the E. Fraud was elegant, too elegant for an amateur. I didn't confront anyone, didn't storm into Simon's office. I simply copied everything, encrypted the files, stored them in 3 separate cloud vaults under aliases I'd created years ago during an internal security overhaul no one else had ever fully understood. If you're still watching, thank you. Don't blink. The best part hasn't even happened yet. They thought firing me was the end of the story. They had no idea. I was just getting started. The morning after I got canned, there was no alarm, no khakis, no drive-through coffee on the way to hell. Just silence. And something else. Stillness. The kind of stillness that only comes when every part of you knows exactly what you're about to do. I sat at my old desk at home. Same one I used to pull all-nighters at when Blackwell was still young and messy and worth something. Julia brought me coffee. No questions. Just a quiet nod and a hand on my shoulder before walking out the door. We'd been married 21 years. She knew when I needed space. And she knew better than to interrupt when I was sharpening a blade. Once the door clicked shut, I reached under the desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. Out came a small flash drive. Black plastic. No labels, no logos, just insurance. Years ago, when Blackwell was expanding fast, I'd pushed hard for off-site encrypted backups, in case of insider threats, ransomware, executive stupidity. Legal had grumbled. IT had dragged their feet. But they approved it, and then promptly forgot about it. I didn't. I plugged in the drive, waited as the directories loaded, years of emails, admin logs, meeting minutes, system access snapshots, vendor lists, authorization trails. And then I saw it: the entire payment stream to Northbridge Consulting Group. 18 months of regular withdrawals, $2.1 million total. Each payment signed off through an elevated access log belonging to one man, Marcus Denton, Chief Financial Officer. I dug deeper. Northbridge had a registered owner, Andrew Denton, Marcus's cousin. They hadn't even bothered to use a fake name. A few quick social media checks confirmed it: family photos, birthday posts, vacation selfies in Aruba. It was all there. The scheme was brilliant in its simplicity. Each quarter, they padded real software expenses by 10 to 15%, just enough to slip under radar. And rerouted the overflow to Northbridge. I pulled old procurement records, cross-referenced them against vendor licenses. Every anomaly synced perfectly. The theft wasn't sloppy. It was practiced, rhythmic, like someone had turned fraud into muscle memory. I leaned back in my chair. No anger, no shaking hands. Just that, same cold clarity again. They didn't just let me go, they needed me gone, before I could connect these dots and become a problem. Too late. My phone buzzed. Text from Kyle, one of the junior analysts I'd mentored. Read, sorry man. Total BS. What they did. Wolf's already moving into your old office. I stared at the screen, didn't reply. Kyle was a good kid, still believed the world was mostly fair. He'd learn. I opened a new document, started typing. At the top, forensic audit trail, internal use only. But I didn't send it to the board. Not yet. I knew how this worked. They'd paint me as a disgruntled ex-employee, call it revenge porn. An emotional outburst from someone who couldn't adapt to organizational change. I didn't just want the truth out. I wanted it to land like a hammer through glass. I needed leverage, timing, control. This wasn't about getting even. It was about restoring balance and on my terms. I encrypted the files, backed them up again, twice. One copy on a cold drive in my fireproof safe. One in a cloud vault registered under a shell Gmail account created in 2013 when I was testing spear phishing resistance. That night, over dinner, Julia looked at me and said, "You're quiet, focused, like you're hunting something." I didn't answer. Just kept eating because I wasn't hunting. Not yet, I was setting the bait. They thought the storm had passed. They didn't realize the eye of the hurricane I was just getting closer. Because sometimes the quietest man in the room sees everything, precisely because everyone assumes he sees nothing. They thought pushing me out would make me irrelevant. They didn't realize they had just unplugged the only firewall standing. Between them and a very public disaster, they thought sidelining me would make me blind. They had no idea. They were about to walk straight into the storm. They thought I would crawl away quietly. Instead, I picked the perfect day to light the match. Wednesday board meeting day, quarterly reviews, budget approvals, executive bonuses, all signed in ink and sealed in smiles. Perfect. I parked across the street from Blackwell Technologies' glass tower at 8:47 a.m. Coffee in hand, engine off. Window cracked just enough to taste the cold fall air of Ashridge, Indiana. Inside my laptop, an email account blinked to life. One I'd created years ago during a simulated internal breach test. Clean domain. Never linked to me. Hidden in plain sight. At 9:15 a.m., I clicked compose. Subject line, urgent, irregular financial activity detected. Recipient, Simon Hale. I laid out just enough detail. Payment dates, vendor name, inconsistencies in documentation, no accusations, no names, just enough smoke to make anyone who knew about the fire start sweating. At 9:42, my phone buzzed. Unknown. Number. Voicemail. Simon's voice stiff but trying to sound calm. "Reed, I just saw your message. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Let's talk. Call me back right away." I didn't. Instead, I drove 3 blocks to a cafe with no cameras and Wi-Fi too slow for corporate tracking. At 10:11 a.m., a second email came in, this time from Angela Merritt, head of HR. "Mr. Callahan, please refrain from further communication with Blackwell personnel. Legal action may be pursued if this continues." Predictable, they'd gone from curious to threatened in under an hour. But they missed a detail. I never signed a separation agreement. No NDA, no non-disparagement clause, nothing to muzzle me. If you believe this story deserved to be told, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe. There's more where this came from. At 11:30, I drove to Heartland Bank and opened a safe deposit box I hadn't touched in 5 years. Inside, a backup flash drive containing archived security protocols and server access logs from my last 5 years at Blackwell, buried deep in the metadata. Time-stamped evidence showing that Marcus Denton had quietly escalated his finance system privileges around the same time Northbridge Consulting Group started siphoning money. Coincidence? Sure, and the sun's just a flashlight in the sky. By noon, my phone had 4 missed calls. Simon, Angela, Damian Wolf, even Marcus. I let them rot in voicemail purgatory. At 12:47, I got a message from Kyle. "Hey, people are freaking out. Wolf called a closed door. They're locking down system access. What's going on? Poor kid, still playing checkers on a chessboard. I replied with 2 words. Stay out. At 3:05 p.m., my landline rang. I hadn't used that number in years, I answered. Said nothing. A breath. Then, Reed, it's Marcus. I stayed silent. He cleared his throat. There seems to be some confusion. If you have questions, we should discuss this privately. No confusion. I said, pause. We can handle this like professionals, no need to escalate. You already did. More silence. Then the shift. His voice hardened. You're making a serious mistake. We can be flexible here. Severance. Consulting contract. Whatever makes this go away. Not interested. You don't want this to get messy. Smiled. Too late. Then I hung up. 10 minutes later, an email arrived. Angela again. New tone. Attached was a revised severance package, twice the original offer, plus a legal agreement demanding complete silence on all company matters past and present. They were moving fast, throwing money like sandbags in a flood. But the levee was already cracking. They didn't realize the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one yelling. It's the one who's already made peace with what he's about to do next. They tried to plug the leaks with threats and money, but the foundations were already rotting, and the water was rising. One bad apple doesn't rot a company. It takes a system of liars to hollow it out from within. I thought I'd seen the worst. I was wrong. That night, long after Julia had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with nothing but a dim lamp and a 6-year-old ThinkPad humming like an old dog by the fire. The deeper I went, the darker it got. 3 years ago. That's when it began. Not when I noticed, when it actually started. The first entries showed up in a side ledger tied to a consulting firm called Eastbrook Strategies. Sounded harmless, sounded boring, which was the point. Invoices appeared. Quarterly. Vague services. Organizational review. Growth audits. Performance calibration. All jargon, no specifics. But the payments? $18,000, then $24,000, then $39,000. Quarter by quarter, all signed off without review. Eastbrook was registered to a woman named Rachel Denton, Marcus's wife. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering the second layer, not just Denton. Simon Hale was in on it too. I pulled archived emails I'd kept from 2 CTO transitions ago. Buried in an old project folder, misnamed and long ignored, was a thread titled Access Request, Core Admin Keys. Simon had requested elevated access. Months before he was even officially hired. The approval? Backdated and digitally signed by someone who no longer worked at the company. I checked the metadata. The doc had been tampered with, the logs cleaned manually, and the one consultant who helped implement that access shift, Damian Wolf. His contract came through a side channel. No RFP, no vendor evaluation, just a closed-loop hire signed by Marcus and co-signed by Simon. I traced Wolf's payment trail, and there it was. Wolf wasn't being paid as a consultant. He was billing under a shell LLC called Forge Path Systems based out of Wyoming. The listed owner, Rachel Denton. Again. They had built an entire web of fake vendors, real enough to fool casual audits, but hollow at the core. Each vendor technically existed. Each service technically provided something. But the bills were inflated. The work duplicated. The oversight non-existent. It was theft by 1,000 well-dressed cuts. Over 3 years, they'd siphoned more than $4.8 million from a company they were supposed to protect, and not a single board member had noticed, because the reports were clean. The balance sheets padded, and every whistleblower was quietly laid off, restructured, or invited to pursue other opportunities. Like I was, I compiled everything, a 78-page dossier, labeled, chronological, sourced, every payment, every vendor. Every name. I even mapped the flow, from invoice to internal approval to disbursement to final destination. I cross-checked it all against public filings, social media, family links, and old security camera metadata. I didn't want suspicion. Wanted certainty. At 2:11 a.m., I exported the file. Named it Root Rot, Internal. I uploaded 3 encrypted copies to secure drives across multiple cloud services using burner accounts tied to junk domains I owned from a side project in 2016. Then I picked up the phone and called one man, Samuel Greer. Board member, semi-retired, old school, one of the last people at Blackwell who still believed that honor wasn't a punchline. He answered on the second ring. Callahan? Thought you'd fallen off the grid. Not quite, I said. I need 15 minutes, in person. He paused. This about Marcus? And Simon, and Damien, and about $4.8 million. Silence. Then a sigh. I always knew something didn't smell right. Where? I gave him the address of a park 5 miles from Blackwell HQ. Neutral ground. He agreed. No hesitation. They had spent 3 years building a house of cards. What they didn't realize was that I was the one holding the floor plans. They thought their secrets were buried deep enough. They forgot I was the one who built the foundation. Some battles aren't won with fists. They're won with truth, timed perfectly, and detonated with silence. Thursday, 7:58 a.m. The coffee on my porch had gone cold, but I didn't care. The real warmth was sitting in a digital file about to blow a hole through the roof of Blackwell Technologies. The email was queued. Set to send at exactly 8 a.m. to the entire board of directors. Subject line: before you approve Q3 bonuses, read this. Attached: a 78-page dossier, timestamps, vendor trails, shell companies, names, dates, numbers, every lie they ever told, exposed in the cold light of logic. No emotions, no accusations, just data that couldn't lie. At 8:01 a.m., it was gone. Delivered. The next 17 minutes were quiet. No fanfare. No fireworks, just the sound of the wind through the trees outside my house. At 8:17 a.m., the first call came in. Blocked number, I didn't answer. At 8:21, the second one, same. Then the messages flooded in. Mr. Callahan, we've received your communication. Please call us immediately. Angela Merritt, HR Reed. This is Simon Hale. We need to speak now. Voicemail. I let it all sit. Because at 9 more a.m., the board's emergency finance subcommittee convened, and Samuel Greer, armed with a physical copy of the report, walked in like a man holding thunder in his briefcase. Inside that boardroom, executives scrambled. By 9:17 a.m., Marcus Denton was being questioned. By 9:32, Simon Hale had left the room, white as chalk. By 9:48, Damian Wolf's keycard access was disabled remotely, and by 10:10 a.m., local law enforcement entered the building. I was at a diner 2 towns over when the first news alert hit my phone. Blackwell executives under investigation for financial misconduct. 4.8 matter missing. No names, not yet, but they were coming. At 11:03 a.m., my landline rang again. I answered. Mr. Callahan, a measured female voice began. This is Patricia Niles, General Counsel for Blackwell. We need you to come in immediately to discuss. No, sir. This would be far better handled and it's already handled. Everything I have is backed up in 3 secure locations. One of them is set to auto-send to the SEC and 2 newsrooms if I go dark for more than 48 hours. Long silence. Then, the board is taking this seriously. We're already placing individuals on administrative leave. Good, I said. Then you're finally catching up. I hung up. At 2:22 p.m., a second headline popped up. Blackwell CFO and CEO placed on leave. Amid allegations, and by 3 p.m., Samuel Greer called. Reed, he said, skipping greetings. It's a damn bloodbath. Good, I replied, calm, as a lake. Marcus confessed. Tried to pin it all on Simon. Simon swears he was manipulated. Wolf claims he didn't know what he was signing. I laughed. The board's not buying it, he continued. We're bringing in federal auditors. Criminal charges are inevitable. Pause. Read. The board wants to talk to you. About? Not your old role. They're offering something new. Chief Security and Integrity Officer. Full oversight. You'd report only to the board. I said nothing. Frankly, Samuel added, they don't trust anyone else now. I asked for a day to think. That night, Julia sat across from me reading the articles. She looked up. What are you going to do? I took a breath. The damage is done. The system is clean. Now comes the rebuild. She smiled. Then build it right this time. The next morning, I walked into Blackwell Technologies, not as a victim, but as the man who had burned down corruption and walked out without a scratch. 10 board members. 1 contract. I placed my terms on the table. Unlimited audit access. Final say on financial tech decisions. Power to shut down suspicious vendors without executive approval. 1 board member raised an eyebrow. This is unusual. I stared back. So was embezzling $4.8 million. They signed unanimously. By Monday, my name was printed on a new badge, Reed Callahan, Chief Security and Integrity Officer, and when I walked through the IT floor, no one clapped. No one cheered, but they all stood up, in silence. Because sometimes respect isn't earned in noise. It's earned in truth that breaks a system, then rebuilds it stronger. They underestimated the wrong man, and the system they thought they could manipulate, now it reports to him. Sometimes victory isn't about standing on ashes. It's about choosing what deserves to be rebuilt and what should stay buried. 6 months later, Ashridge had started to bloom again, maples shedding, gold on the sidewalks, wind crisp enough to bite but soft enough to feel like home. I sat in the corner office, the one that used to belong to Simon. Same view, same skyline. But everything underneath had changed. Blackwell Technologies was clean now. Audits came back, clear. Security systems had been rebuilt from scratch, and the rot that once festered behind boardroom doors, gone. Marcus Denton had pled guilty. Tried to barter for leniency, offered names, timelines, paper trails. It helped his sentence, but not his conscience. Simon Hale? Fired. Under investigation, still playing the victim. Damian Wolf vanished overseas, but the extradition wheels had begun to turn. They all had one thing in common. None of them expected the quiet man to fight back, and none of them expected the system to be rebuilt by the one they tried to erase. Across the floor, Kyle now ran the day-to-day IT ops, promoted, steady, still rough around the edges, but I saw myself in him. One afternoon, he knocked on my door. You have a minute? I nodded. He stepped in. I just wanted to say, thanks, for all of it. I leaned back, considering him. You know what the most dangerous thing in a company is, Kyle? He shook his head. A culture that punishes people for asking the right questions. He nodded. Understood more than I said. That's why he'll be all right. At home, things were quieter too. Julia still made coffee at 6:30 sharp, still left a kiss on my cheek before I walked out the door. But she looked at me differently now, not as the man who almost lost everything, but as the one who knew where his line was and never let anyone cross it. One evening she asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd just walked away?" I looked at her for a long time. I wouldn't be sitting here, and they'd still be stealing. She didn't say anything, just reached out, took my hand, and that silence, that quiet acknowledgement, meant more than any applause ever could. That weekend, I visited the old Blackwell building, the first one. 2 rooms above a drugstore, now turned into a dance studio. I stood across the street, watching people go in and out. 17 years ago, I'd walked through that door with a cheap laptop, a second-hand tie, and hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, you could build something that mattered, and for a while. I did. But eventually, they stopped seeing people. They saw numbers, margins, leverage. And in doing so, they forgot something vital. You can replace a job, but you can't replace a man who still gives a damn. I pulled out my phone, typed one line into a blank post. Never burn bridges. Just wait. Some collapse under the weight of their own corruption. Within minutes, the post went viral in the tech world, not because it was profound, but because everyone knew someone who had lived it. Someone quiet, overlooked, tossed aside. But, still watching, still ready, that's who I am now. Not bitter, not angry, just finished. The war is over. The fire has passed. The ruins have been swept clean, and what remains is me, stronger, quieter, and more dangerous than they'll ever understand. Some bridges deserve to burn. Others, if rebuilt with truth, become stronger than the fire that once consumed them. Thank you for being here. If you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated, know this. You are not alone. You are not done, and you are not powerless. Drop a comment below. What part of Reed's story stayed with you the longest? We read everyone, because every man who stood his ground deserves to be heard. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice, done right.